What up, guys? The Bench Buddies are back with our Week 14 college football preview and picks. Obviously, I got Ty joining me here to break down rivalry week and obviously the last week of the regular season. But before we get into it, we got to look at our 500 week last week. Like you just said before we started, a lot of upsets last week, and we were on the right end of some of them and more end of on the wrong side. So, Ty, I guess what's your biggest takeaway from last week?
Yeah, a couple teams I thought really would have enough to get it done in those tough road environments. You got Ole Miss, Colorado, and A&M. I thought they would all get out of those places with a win. None of them did, and that's opened the door for teams like Indiana, SMU, and even Clemson to maybe play their way in, and maybe even those three-loss SEC teams when it's all said and done.
I agree. And I mean, we'll move to our locks. Obviously, 500 yet again for me, and you with a 4 and 2. The UCLA, Western Kentucky didn't really have to sweat those, but other than that, I think everything was pretty comfortable win for you.
Yep.
Maybe besides the ASU game, I guess, just because all that chaos.
Yeah, some crazy stuff going on in that game, but Ohio State has had a feeling they'd really take care of business there. But I think Indiana played better than it looks because they were a couple of special teams blunders away from making that a much closer game. So I think they've done enough to play their way into the playoff.
And then this week, obviously, we got some locks for you. Don't know how we're going to do because it's rivalry week, so you could, get the benefit of the doubt of the points. And I like taking the points during rivalry games because you just never know. And that's why you can see I'm taking the points for 3 games, favorites for 2, and then the over in the Tennessee Vandy game. I just think that's going to be a back and forth game.
Yeah, I'm with you on taking the points. I think some of these huge spreads and rivalry games can be misleading. Sometimes it's easy to go with the favorite. There's so much better of a team, but rivalry games can be a lot different. So that's kind of the route I'm going with my Michigan Wolverines and with Mississippi State getting 26. That's a lot of points. And I think Notre Dame also continues to roll even at USC. I'd have another comfortable win.
And we'll break down the first game. It's actually on Thanksgiving this year, which, is pretty uncommon for the college football season to play on Thanksgiving just because of the NFL. But it's a great game. You get Memphis, Tulane. Memphis, I think, would have been the favorite earlier in the year with Seth Hennigan and company. Memphis is still putting up a solid season at 9 and 2, but Tulane, where they're ranked right now at 17, this team could win out, win their conference, beat Army, be 11 and 2, and they might have a playoff bid when it's all said and done. And I think they're going to keep that conversation going here with a win at home against Memphis.
Yeah, they were talking about this tonight with the rankings. Tulane could win out, and even if Boise State holds serve and wins out, they could actually get in over the Big 12 champion if things work out a certain way. And this team has been rolling. They're one of the best group of five teams at the moment. So I think they continue to take care of business here on Thanksgiving.
Then moving to Saturday, I think we're going to start it with probably the biggest implications for the college football playoff game of the weekend. You got South Carolina, Clemson. Obviously, South Carolina, it's not a conference game. Same for Clemson. If South Carolina wins this game, they're 9 and 3 sitting there in the SEC with 3 decent losses and waiting for someone to slip up. And I think that's what's going to happen. I think South Carolina is going to take care of business in the rivalry game. They're going to knock Clemson out of the playoff in the meantime and just hope that a few teams in front of them can lose and maybe South Carolina squeaks in there.
Yeah, I think this is the prime example of why expansion teams was a great idea for college football. Last year really have a shot to win their conference. So this game wouldn't really be on a lot of people's radar, but this year it's a huge game. I mean, Clemson ranked in that 12 spot, South Carolina just outside. So both of these teams do have a shot at making the playoff. And I think this is going to be a great game to watch in the noon time slot. I think Clemson does pull it out in a really coin flip game. Just going into Death Valley, I think is going to be tough for the Gamecocks. They've been rolling, but I think they kind of come back down to earth this week.
And then also another huge game, the Battle of Tennessee, Tennessee, Vanderbilt. And I don't think, in recent years, this has been a huge game just because Vanderbilt's been so bad, but it's at home in Nashville. Tennessee goes on the road. Obviously, like we said, it's a rivalry game. You never know. But I got to go with my Volunteers. Um, the way Nico and Dylan Sampson and the defense has been playing, this team looks like they're on a crash course to host a playoff game. And, like we mentioned before we even started, it's almost better to not make your conference championship game at this point because we see Tennessee ranked eighth. they win this game, they're a lock for the playoff. They're not going to get jumped. The only thing that can help them, obviously, if few teams lose it, they would move up. But for this game, I think it's going to be a gritty game. I expect it close in the first half, but I just think Tennessee's defense and talent takes over in the second half.
Yeah, I think this is a big trap game for Tennessee. Like you said, they really don't have a shot to go to the SEC championship. So really, it's take care of business here, and you're in the playoff, probably getting a home game in the first round. So very easy to look ahead to that home game, but I think they do go in there and get it done. Vanderbilt's win over Alabama has caught everyone's attention, so I don't think anyone's really overlooking them too much this year, and I think Tennessee will get it done in a close game.
And obviously, the game, obviously, we're both going to roll with our Wolverines here because we can't pick that team that's, from that one state. Um, the only way Michigan wins this game, let's just be honest, Davis Warren has to commit no turnovers, and this run game just has to break through like it always has the last few years. Obviously, different teams, different storylines. It's a rivalry game, that's just gonna be the theme of the week. You just never know. Ohio State hasn't beaten Michigan in over 1,000 days, I think it is now, if we were counting. So you just never know in these games. And, but on Ohio State's path, if they want to win this game, they got to come out and put up 14 right off rip. Because if they don't do that and they let Michigan hang around, you just never know.
Yeah, I think the path for Michigan is that depleted Ohio State offensive line needs to kind of be bullied by that Michigan D line that has tons of NFL talent on it. And I think Michigan's run game needs to show up. They need to feed Khalil Mullings. They need to stop messing around and playing three running backs equally. I think they really need to just feed him the rock and let him go to work. Obviously, 20 and a half points. It's been a rough year, so it's hard to really see a big path for Michigan in this game, but I can't pick against them in this game of all games. So going with Michigan to shock the world here and really shake things up in the Big Ten.
And then moving to the 3:30 slate, I'm going with an upset that I think is going to shock a lot of people. I'm going with the Big Orange at home. Now, Syracuse, they have the chance to do one of the funniest things ever, just knock Miami out of the ACC championship game, actually. And maybe this team might not even make the playoff at 10 and 2. Now, it might sound crazy, just, circumstances need to happen, but Syracuse could win out. Let's say they win this game. I think they would be the ones that would get in the ACC championship game, I believe, if Clemson were to, if someone else, I think Clemson gets in if Miami loses. Um, so maybe Clemson, even if they lose this week, they still get into a playoff and a whole lot of chaos. And if you're going on my picks, that's exactly what's going to happen here. So I'm going with Syracuse. Kyle McCord obviously has to have a big day to keep up with Cam Ward and that high explosive Miami offense.
I think Cam Ward's kind of a player who's been forgotten for as much as someone who was at one point a Heisman contender can be. But I think this is going to be another vintage performance from him. And I think they're going to need it because I did pick Syracuse to cover. I think it'll be, the same Miami game that we've seen 4 or 5 times this year where they seem all but out of a game and Cam Ward finds a way to lead them back to a win. So I do think Syracuse gives them all they can handle, but Miami comes out with a close win.
And then also you got the Iron Bowl for the first time on ABC, not on CBS in I think 30 something years. And I'm going with Bama at home. Now, if this game was in Auburn like it was last year, and we saw what happened last year in the Iron Bowl, I'd probably go Auburn here just because, Bama really their season's kind of lost at this point. They still have a chance to make the playoff, but I don't know, it just doesn't seem right in the first year under DeBoer. So don't be shocked if this Auburn team keeps it close and it comes down to maybe the last minute or so. But because it is at home, I got to take Bama.
Of belief right now that they can pull off this win. Last week, I think, changed a ton. I think this line would have been probably double what it is right now, if not for Alabama's Burn's big win over A&M. But I still think Alabama at home in this game, still with something to play for. It's probably a long shot at this point, but they still have a chance, and I think that's just enough for them to get through at home here. And I think they'll
And move into another game at 3:30. Good slate at 3:30 this week. Notre Dame USC. And what does Marcus Freeman tell his guys this week? Win and you're in the playoff. That's all you need to know because Notre Dame, obviously no conference. So they're not going to play another game. And if you sit 11 and 1, you're hosting a playoff game. South Bend's going to get a playoff game, and I think that's going to be the case. USC, has looked okay at times. Obviously, big win last week against rival UCLA. But I just don't think the mojo continues this week. I think Notre Dame is just on a crash course to make a honestly to make a run for the college football playoff this year. This team has been very good, and they could potentially be this ranked number two if they don't have that loss to Northern Illinois, which people I feel like have forgotten about because they've been so dominant.
Yeah, dominant is a perfect word to describe them. I know their schedule since that Northern Illinois game has been pretty soft. They played two ranked teams. They were both service academies, but they've just ran through everyone. They haven't struggled and played down to their competition to this point. So I think they continue to roll. I know USC, it's a big rivalry game. They get it at home. But I think Notre Dame just continues to roll, and they haven't shown that they're going to struggle with a lackluster opponent. So I think that continues here, and they play their way into the playoff.
And then moving to the nightcap, I got to throw the toilet bowl in there this year. Florida State, at this point, these teams are playing for pride and I want to say playing for a job, but it kind of seems like Napier's already coming back and same with Norvell. I think Florida gets the edge. They're playing for a little more because they're playing to go to a bowl game, and it'd be pretty remarkable if this Florida team gets to a bowl game after where they were just a few weeks ago and the schedule they had left. I don't think anybody would have had them in this position. And favored by 15 on the road speaks volumes to how bad this FSU team is this year. So give me the Gators.
Yeah, I think that stadium is going to be close to 50% Gator fans in this game because they have a lot of momentum right now in their season. Obviously, beating LSU and Ole Miss back to back. Now, if you can couple that with a rivalry win on the road to finish the season, and yes, Florida State is awful, maybe the worst Power Four team in the country. But still, if you can have three wins like that in a row to finish your season, that would really say a lot for them moving forward into next year. And I think they get it done. I don't see them having really any trouble here. Yes, rivalry games, you can kind of throw out the records, but when your record's 2-9, kind of hard to throw that out. So I think they win easily.
And then talk about another big game. I mean, besides that Clemson, South Carolina, this one has SEC championship implications. Whoever wins that goes to that game to face Georgia. It's hard to bet against Texas and what they've been able to do this year. Go on the road, beat Michigan, play some really good football. But in the last few weeks, this team has kind of just coasted to get to this point, and I think it's not going to be one of those coasting kind of wins, but it won't be a dominant win, but they're going to do enough to win. And that's why I'd stay away from that 5.5 because I have no clue how this game is going to finish. A&M could be 9-2, lost in four overtimes last week on a dropped pass easy in the receiver's hands. So who knows? This A&M team has a chip on their shoulder coming into this game, but just because of the talent wise, I got to take Quinn Ewers and the Longhorns. And maybe if they get down early, we could see a benching of Quinn Ewers and they throw Arch Manning in just because this game does have a lot of implications.
Yeah, this is a big one for Texas. Everyone thinks they're in a really good spot at number three, but their resume is not really any different than Penn State's. Both of those teams have played one really good team and lost to them and have beaten nobody. Texas, I mean, I hate to say it, I know they're in the SEC, but what's their best win right now? At Vanderbilt, at Michigan, both of those teams are 6-5. So, really hard to predict what you're going to get from them in a game like this. But, I'm just banking on the talent, like you said. I think they're just going to have enough with Quinn Ewers at quarterback, those dynamic playmakers on offense. I think just the eye test from Texas shows that they can go into this road environment and come out with a win. And they'll be 11-1 playing for the SEC title.
Then the last game we got for you, it's a big one. It's on ESPN. I forgot to update that in the top left, so don't look up there, even though I told you. We got Kansas State, Iowa State, and the Big 12 is just the big mess, let's just say, at this point in this year, because anybody can get into the title game. I don't even know the scenarios if Iowa State were to win or Kansas State were to win, because there's just so many different things that can happen this weekend. I'm going with the Cyclones. I think they've been the most consistent team this year in the Big 12. I know they've had a few weeks where they just haven't shown up and lost, but Iowa State, I think at home, Kansas State's starting to figure it out, and I think it's just going to be one of those kind of back and forth defensive battles. I don't think this is going to be a high scoring game, and I like the Cyclones if that is the case. So Iowa State 10-2, I would assume they would get to the Big 12 championship with that win.
I think so. I think it's ASU and Iowa State. If they win, they're both in. But I don't think it's going to happen. The Big 12 has been impossible to predict this year. One team seems like they're in the driver's seat and then they lose two in a row. But Kansas State, on paper, from week one, is the best team in this conference. If you just look at what was supposed to happen at the start of the season. So I'm just going back to that. I'm going back to who has the most talent. And I think Kansas State can get it done. And if they win this game, get to 9-3, I think that's still a successful season for them. And I think they will. I know Iowa State favored playing at home, but I just don't think they have enough here. They've been struggling through these wins, and then taking those two losses as well. So they've been kind of reeling lately.
Yeah, that's gonna do it for our picks this week. Obviously, have a happy Thanksgiving. Everyone have a good weekend. We'll be back next week to break down, the conference championship games and a possible preview of what could happen in the playoff and the bowl game situation. But until the next time, the Bench Buddies are out.